Uh, hey friends, this is Big Mike from Highground Gaming. We're recording our first ever Highground Hobby Hangout, and we have a guest that really needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. It's the man, the myth, the legend, Vincent Venturella, uh,
Hey, how you
host
doing, everyone?
host of Warhammer Weekly, and the creator of the Hobby Cheating series, which, as of recording, has 418 videos, which is absolutely insane to me that you've made that many videos. But I'm almost caught up because I found Warhammer in 2021, so I haven't been at it that long. But I've definitely gravitated towards your channel, and I told Vince before I was fanboying a little bit this week, but just really excited to have you on and talk to you about all things mini painting. So
100%, man. Glad to be here. So you're a pandemic hobbyist. Is that what it was? Did that bring you into the mix?
it is, yes. So a buddy of mine got me the Indominus box as a birthday present
Okay.
and a whole bunch of Army Painter paints. And I painted my first unit of Assault Intercessors and never looked back. And then while looking for mini painting videos, I saw the Age of Sigmar models and I was like, well, that's a lot cooler. So, uh,
I mean, you're absolutely correct there. Nothing wrong. No falsehood detected.
yes, definitely an Age of Sigmar fan. I have an army of Thousand Sons in the cabinet over there, but they have never seen the table under my control. So uh, definitely a future project sometime, I'm sure.
Look, there's nothing wrong with having some 40K armies as well, as I'm sure we'll talk about as we get into it. So it's all good.
Absolutely. So what are you working on currently? Like big project in the works or anything?
Oh, sure. I'm working on actually as we sit here talking. I'm literally working on this very nice um what is the actual name of it? Night of the Zombie is the name of it. It's from Mindwork Games, and it's a really cool display miniature. And I'm just excited to be getting back into my passion, which is really I love this kind of display painting, this kind of thing. So this is like a beautiful, beautiful sculpt. Yeah, just doing it up for probably I'm sure what'll end up being Gen Con and Nova Capital Palette and stuff like that. But I'm not really super focused at the moment on, what if it's gonna go to a competition or anything like that. I'm just having fun with the model.
Great. That's always that's my favorite part of the hobby, rather than playing is the painting. So always good to have something on the workbench.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. I'm also simultaneously just working it for or doing a small Tau force for the 10th edition of 40K, so that's also kind of behind me. And whenever I get like frustrated with this one or need a break from doing very serious work, I go over to my Tau, which are a little more of like a speed paint, fun experimentation thing.
so why did you choose Tau out of all the factions?
Yeah, why not?
Oh, that's that. I mean, hey, sometimes that's all
I
it
like
takes.
I like yeah, I like robots. I like big guns. Seemed like it had both of those things. Yeah, I don't know, it just seemed cool.
Great. How many competitions would you say you enter a year?
Uh, in any given year, I don't know, probably 4 or 5, I guess, probably
Okay.
something like that.
Great.
I don't think too many more than that. That's about right. Yeah,
Awesome. And fans of your channel will know your love hate relationship with the Golden Demon process.
of
Um,
course. Yes.
we
I mean, I imagine it'll be one less next year, since
yeah,
I highly doubt I'll be going back to Golden Demon.
yeah. I mean, I love seeing your paint jobs for that, but I completely, after watching the Golden Demon videos, I completely understand the logic and couldn't blame you at all. It makes absolute sense. So
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's not it doesn't make me happy. It does not spark joy. And to be frank, that style of painting is not my style of painting. It's not something I'm probably set to excel at clearly. So, know know your strengths in life and don't throw good money after bad, I suppose, right? That kind of thing. So, yeah.
No argument there. So you're starting a Tau army, or have started a Tau army. How
Yes.
how do you get them? What would you call battle ready for your Tau army?
I mean, I'm being very simple with these. I mean, I have a wide span of things I consider painted. I have armies that are speed painted in 24 hours or a weekend. I have armies that I've spent, 6 months on painting every day. It's all a painted army. Any painted figure is better than a not painted figure. For these guys, it's more of just a fun like Tron experiment. I'm not taking it too seriously. So they're a pretty straightforward process. Nothing really too much. Just trying to push some cool effects, some neat pink, like hot pink fluorescent lines and the like Tau panel lines and stuff like that, and playing with those kinds of things. But yeah, for the most part, pretty simple, I suppose. Overall, like it's hard to say because everybody's 2 hours of effort is different, right? Like what I accomplish in 2 hours, or what I might consider sort of quote unquote battle ready, might not be what somebody else does, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like everybody has their own sense of what they want their army to look like, and as I said, any painted figure is better than an unpainted figure, so I'm highly supportive of that.
Right. Yeah, because at least some of the bigger tournaments, they're like, well, three colors isn't enough, and they wish that rule would change. And as someone who is not as long lasting in the hobby so far
Sure.
as a lot of people, my armies are not as time intensive as probably some people's are. So I'm very supportive of simple is better, as long as you're happy with what's on the table. I think that's where I live, painting wise.
Yeah,
So
I mean, realistically, the whole three color thing is a holdover from a time long ago. And there's no reason, given the nature of paints and the tools and the world today, that anybody should not be quite easily clearing that bar. You don't need any special things to get on there, like to have a painted army. Just like I mean, there's been a million videos about slap shot, but similar. I've been doing underpainting and speed paint videos for years and years, and that kind of thing is really all you need, right? Like there's no need to go too much farther than that. You can quite easily have uh, lots of colors, or whatever you want, like some
yeah,
levels of contrast and interesting color in your fig, just within I don't know, 20 minutes a miniature, if you're so inclined, depending on the mini, right?
right.
And liberal use of appropriate speed paint stuff.
So looking back at least all the hobby cheating videos that I've watched, obviously you made them, so you know what's in them all. What do you think the
Oh,
most?
absolutely. Yes. I have all 400 and plus completely memorized, no doubt about it.
I know
Yes.
you can just total recall. I know, but
Hmm.
what would you say is like the most underutilized or under practiced skill in mini painting that can just make like the average painter, 10% better if they really focus on that one skill?
Yeah, it's hard to say because obviously everyone's going to be different. The easy answer here is I'll split it between two different things. One in final effect, and one in sort of technique. So I think enough people don't focus on like wet blending early in their journey, when it really is an extremely powerful tool, especially if you're talking about getting things done fast and achieving blends and stuff. It's a wonderful way to just start a miniature. Now you have to have some amount of experience to know like what color is going to work and how thick your paint should be and such. But that's true for everything. Everything takes some amount of practice and knowledge. And I just think that like wet blending is a very powerful thing. If you watch somebody like Sam Lens paint,
Mm-hmm.
Sam's a better painter than I. Okay. Uh, he starts most every miniature he does by establishing a gradient between usually his midtone or a step above his midtone and his shadows, with just a very fast wet blend with very cheap large brushes. That's a powerful technique because it's allowing him to really get a lot of color, a lot of value on the miniature quickly. Then he just goes back in and with a more sharp control, he cleans up and does a few final steps to make them pop. But even if he sort of stops there or doesn't put much more work into it, it ends up looking quite good, right? So I think technique wise, that would be my answer. Now, effect wise or something like that, the answer is just contrast, right? Like everybody doesn't have enough contrast. You just more like it's always more. And in all of my years of reviewing people's miniatures, and I cannot state how many thousands of miniatures I've reviewed over the years. Okay, as a judge, as somebody who ran the PMP and did a monthly review for what 7 years, right? Um, reviewing 80 to 100 miniatures in that a month. As part of my Patreon, I review miniatures every day for people. Um, like, I've only one time given the answer of you have too much contrast. I can remember exactly what it was. I know exactly who painted the minis, and I remember exactly what the minis were and all of that because it was one time. It stood out to me so strongly. I couldn't tell you the number of times I've said you need more contrast or more tonal variation. That is too the stars in the heavens would not capture it. But too much contrast, no, you're never in danger. He's like, well, I'm afraid I was going to go too far. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not. I promise. It's almost impossible.
So not to out anybody, but what were the minis that had too much contrast?
They were wardens from Age of Sigmar, so they were Lumineth Realm Lord wardens, and everything on the mini ran from pure, like every color on the mini ran from basically pure white to pure black,
Oh
like
wow.
with the color in the middle. So it's just too far. It's just too much. But that's what we're talking about here. I mean, it went like like if the purple cloth started at white, turned purple, went black, like that kind of thing, and so on and so forth. I won't out the painter.
Yeah, we don't need to name names. That's just interesting. It's interesting to me that like in all the time, because I mean you've reviewed my minis. I'm in your Patreon under review, and um in all the time that you've reviewed miniature painting, I can't believe it's only been the one. That's just,
That's it.
I mean, that's
That
quite
one
a,
time.
I mean, you have quite a history, so that's pretty impressive actually for the community that we haven't gone too crazy.
It's, I mean, like conservatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've reviewed 10,000 miniatures in my lifetime, right? From a professional standpoint of how people painted it. That's an extremely conservative number. Let's just, I'll use that just as a baseline. So the fact that I remember the one out of 10,000, right? There you go. That tells you everything.
Yeah, it's definitely like a cool story to be able to tell. I think, especially because you remember exactly what it was, so really sticks
Yeah.
out. Really kind of a cool thing. Um, so you've done, speaking of the community, you've done a lot to like add tools to the toolbox, right? So hobby cheating obviously adds technique tools and some
Yep.
tutorials to follow along with. But not only that, you've added now a signature series of paints with Monument Hobbies through their
Yep.
Pro Acryl line. By the way, dark yellow green was the color I never knew I needed.
Oh, that's
Um,
great to hear.
I love that color. And then of course there's the Titan body with Creature Caster.
Yep.
So what was the process for developing those things? Like what were you looking to get out of that process? Like how'd you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, in all cases, the answer is really the same, which is I wanted something that was high quality, fun, useful, all of that kind of stuff, like something that I would enjoy. I mean, I have a fairly, this may surprise you to hear, but I have a fairly high standard when it comes to the stuff that I use. I use what I like and I like what I use. I don't feel the need to waste any time with sort of subpar products or things like that. I'm pretty picky about things. Now, I'm also not flippant about things because when it comes to something like paints, I know that like different paints are going to work differently for different people. So I'm not judgmental in that way. If somebody says like, "Oh, I have a great time with this kind of paint," and that's not a kind of paint I enjoy, I also know that that might suit their particular painting style well. A great example of this is Scale 75. I still have like their whole range. It's sitting right here in front of me. It's actually one of the nearest things, easiest for me to grab from my current location where I'm sitting. but I never use them because honestly, they just don't actually work for my painting style really much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I kind of have left them to sight. But you look at somebody like Miniac who uses scale 75 all the time because he paints in this very like soft, methodical, GW obsessed way. It's going to be uh, much more suited to his style, the way he paints, and there's nothing wrong with that. Um, the in the case of like developing the paints, it was just a question of a lot of iterations, right? It was what colors don't exist in the line, what colors do I wish existed in the line, right? And then let's make that happen. Really, nothing more complicated than that, right? In the case, and so there was just lots of trial and error and tests and revisions and stuff like that with seeing what the is it exactly right? Oh, it needs it to be a little bit more this color. It's not quite dark enough. It's not quite this enough. Whatever the case happened to be, right? In the case of the Titan of Body with Creature Caster, which in both of these cases, who knows? Maybe it'll be the only thing we do with them, but maybe not. Maybe we'll have some more stuff coming. You never know in the future. But in the case of that one, that went through lots of iterations from very beginning because I had a very clear vision of what I want these things to be. I've always wanted like really cool giant Titan type minis. Like I just thought that like I think giants are super cool. I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons and still do every week. I mean, I've played D&D since I was 10 years old in 1989, and giants are a thing that's always fascinated me. And same with like titans and Greek myth and stuff like that. Like I was reading all the stories of Greek mythology in second grade or something. I remember getting that book and reading through all the ancient myths. And um, the nature of that was I wanted something that was human but impressive, muscular, beautiful, all of that kind of thing. Like, and I thought it'd be an interesting. It could occupy an interesting space in the creature caster line, which tends to be far more monstrous and
Mm-hmm.
you know sort of horrific and stuff like that, right? So having something that's a little more beautiful, a little more, what do I want to say, like uh, uh, a little more. Um, mm, a little more dreamlike. There you go. That's
Yeah.
what I'll say. Right? Instead of a nightmare, I thought had a lot of value to their line, and it's as far as I know been a very successful fig. So I was very happy to work with them and work with the concept artist and then the sculptor and so on down the line until eventually got the production model and did the paint for it.
Yeah, I have one in a box back here. I'm scared to death of all the skin. I gotta be honest.
Oh, but that's what makes him glorious. And I have a whole video just on that. You can see the whole process.
Yes. So I have watched it, and it's gotten me like I'm like 80% of the way to putting it together, but I got to watch it again so that I can pluck up the courage because that is a ton of skin. And but I painted a whole ogre army, so I know, skin's a thing. You got to do it. So
Yeah, I
um
mean, my honest answer is I can't paint enough skin. This figure I'm working on right now is almost all skin. I put together a bunch of figures today, big giant, like larger 70 or 54 and 75 mil and even 90 mil figs, and they're almost all skin. So
yeah,
I love painting skin. Once you get into it and get in the habit, there's nothing more magnificent to paint than skin tones. It's
yeah,
just fun. It's more fun than any other surface.
excellent. So I'll get there, and I'm sure you'll see it on your review channel in Discord for like Vince. Am I doing this right?
I can't wait. I hope I do. I hope I
Absolutely.
do.
So speaking of watching your videos, I have one burning question.
Sure.
I delved back into the archives and I was watching some of your armies on parade today. And I saw the Skaven army, and there was one set of Storm Fiends in the box. Are they still
Okay.
in the box?
No, they're assembled. I have the storm.
Excellent.
I have all my storm fiends that I have. I don't think I have any Skaven. That's not true. I do still have a box of oh, I don't know, what is it, like that warp lock group thing that came out a while ago with like the bombardier guy at the head.
Yep.
I've never had the desire to paint it. Is the short answer there?
Yeah. I have a my first AOS army was Skaven, so I
The bold choice.
hey, they got the great new book. I'm telling you, where I'm hoping the new GHB lends itself well to all of our wizards, and we'll find out. I'm taking it to Midwest Meltdown, so
I guess time will tell. Yeah. I mean, um, my general feeling on Skaven is they remain one of the most fun, most fair, and most challenging armies to play in the current meta. So, and I don't see any reason why a GHB would change that. The fundamentals of that army are going to always remain very challenging. Requires sort of a very tricksy player to get the most out of it.
yeah,
But that's good. That's very Skaven-y.
that's the way it should be. I completely agree. But let's hope this is 2 days prior to the big um, Warhammer reveal show on July 1st. So
Yes.
hoping the indications have all been Skaven. So I'm hoping to see quite a few interesting new picks out of there. Um, but when you approach your Skaven army, that was back when you were playing fantasy, right? Eighth edition fantasy.
Oh, those Skaven. Oh, those Skaven go back so much farther than that.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Skaven was my first army. So keep in mind that Skaven army that you saw in that video was not my first Skaven army.
Oh,
I
okay.
have one unit from my original army still that I've never gotten rid of. I think I might have had them in the video, which was my plague monks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I keep them because they are the first unit, like entire unit, I ever finished painting, and I was
Well,
so proud of them. I mean, they are childishly painted in retrospect, but nonetheless, at the time, I was, of course, elated. Um, but that whole army, I ended up selling off to go buy the new Skaven sculpts when those came out. I don't know, some years back. So that army was actually that my current Skaven army was painted largely between like I don't know 2010 and I mean, I guess today, realistically, anytime, because I will occasionally still paint models for that army, especially heroes and stuff like that.
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that's so big it doesn't have an end date or an end point. It just has the road goes ever onward, as it were.
yeah. So one of my coworkers for the Highground channel, Brad, he's in a number of our battle reports. He asked me to make sure that I asked you about display boards for tournaments and what
Sure.
you would recommend material wise to get started.
Well, first of all, I hate display boards and think they are the devil and are a pox on the tournament scene in general. Because they are a thing that comes out of a silly armies on parade, history, where you are doing this whole big thing for your army to be literally on parade and set up and shown in a store. And then eventually people started bringing them to tournaments, and then everything just keeps escalating. I mean, the display board that was done last year, or 2 years ago, yeah, 2022, I guess, Adepticon, where, it was this whole castle with everything, and it was like 8 feet tall.
Oh yeah, I saw
They had
pictures
to
of that.
bring a ladder to get up to it. Yes, and by the way, that's, a good friend who is an amazing display board creator. Like, truly, he's absolutely fantastic. But nonetheless, I hate them because they just encourage this sort of this arms race of nonsense of everybody like going bigger and more insane and more crazy. And it's also very like they're very expensive, they're very throwaway. Like most of my display boards just end up sitting there doing nothing once I'm done with them. Like, what do I do with this thing? It has no actual purpose. I can't play a game with it. I can't do anything with it. It's just there.
Yeah,
Okay. So, all of that aside, with my negative Nancying aside about display boards, and I really am quite that. Um, like I just, oh, my contempt is knows almost no bounds. That being said, a good display board, I mean, the fundamentals of it are rather straightforward. It's just building a piece of terrain, but scaled up to 11. So, you're starting with your good old pink or blue foam. You got to get a bunch of glue. You got to get a bunch of, like cheap sand. Like, basically use as few hobby products as you can and go to your hardware store. Most of it's going to be there. A nice piece of uh, like cheap board for the bottom of it, like to put the foam on top of that you can also then drill some handles into is nice. I mean, I have a hobby cheating video on making a display board, but like in general, you want to, you're going to need a lot of like basing grit,
Yeah.
sand, glue, and that. And then from there, it's just what are you trying to create, right? Because you could have if you're trying to build like a 40K Imperial City, it's going to be a very different set of steps you're going to go under than if you're trying to make like a bucolic wilderness scene for a Fey army to inhabit or something, right? Um, but it's a giant craft project,
Yeah.
right? That's what it is. It's not a miniature painting project. It's a giant craft project. It's like making a fairy garden or something, right?
Okay. So just avoid hobby products as much as possible. Tons of
Yes.
grit.
Your hardware store, your garden center, so like indoor bark. That's a good one. That's instant rocks, giant rocks, big giant bags of like garden sand. You can buy like 50-pound bags of it for a few dollars. Like that's going to be enough to cover the whole thing. Cheap white glue that you buy in, big giant bottles. Uh, cans of regular spray paint for sure. You're
Yeah.
gonna need a lot of that. Um, DAP, wall like drywall filler. You're going to use that to create your base ground texture over the foam. Usually, like that's going to be your first layer. You can also use that to smooth out the sides where all the foam is, so you can like dap the side and then sand it down. Obviously, don't sand that kind of stuff like without a mask on because it sends very toxic
Yeah.
dust up into the air. But all those kinds of things. There's so many series of steps just in the prep. And one of the challenges with it is it takes a while because you have to like stack up the foam and glue it together and put heavy weights on it and let it sit for a day. Then you got to put the DAP on there and get it all smoothed out and then you got to let it sit for a day and then you got to sand it down and you got to put on some glue and some grit or something like that to give your ground texture and then you got to let it sit for a day, right? So it's not the kind of thing you do. You're like, oh crap, I got a tournament coming this weekend in 2 days. Let me make a super display board from nothing. Like, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
I've been in that position. I won't lie, and it doesn't usually come together.
Yeah, my first display board, because if you didn't have one at all, you didn't get any points for it. Was cut discs from a log of wood, and they
Okay.
just sat on
Okay.
there. So it was
I mean, that's
and
clever.
two stone horns on a bunch of wood. So it was pretty funny.
Hey, that's a very clever solution.
So you have this really large body of work, right? Hobby cheating, all of the interviews with an artist, models on parade. Your YouTube channel is just packed full of content where if somebody wants to find it, it's probably there. All they have to do is search. What made you start filming your hobby?
I don't know. That's a good question. I've thought about this a lot. I've been asked this question before, and I guess the answer was I looked around YouTube. This is like what, I don't know, a long time ago, 2013, 2014, something like that. And I saw the content that was out there, and I knew I had a lot of things that I was doing in my hobby that I just didn't see other people talking about. A lot of people were I felt going like we're making things too complicated, and a lot of people I felt were like giving bad advice when it comes down to it. And I thought, there's a lot of ways you can cheat. Like I'm obsessed with better results quicker, right? Like like zenithaling and using like thin inks or glazes over the top was something I was doing long before I ever had a channel, right? It's like my seventh hobby cheating video or something like that is about that. What effectively would be slap chop today, right?
Yeah.
And so like I've just always been obsessed with uh wanting to like share the sort of journey. And I like teaching. I like sharing whatever I know. So it just felt very natural, I guess, is the answer. And I don't know, this many years later, still doing it.
Great. Yeah. Well, I know myself and at least everybody that I know always appreciates when the hobby cheating video comes out on Saturday morning. It's like the first thing we watch. So, uh, always happy to see what technique is next. Do you
We've got
find
some fun
yourself?
stuff coming up, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's I think there's going to be a lot of not only with your Tau, I'm sure we're going to see some of that, but also I'm always happy when you bring out your one ogre model to show off a
Oh,
technique.
Larry.
Yeah, Larry the ogre.
Yeah, Larry's he's very popular.
I'm very always excited when he shows up on screen. I know I'm getting something new. So very happy uh, that you're doing it and that you continue to do it, and I hope that you continue to do it for quite a long time because I love it. Um, so when you approach your projects, do you find yourself gravitating back to like a certain color more often than another one?
I mean, like obviously I'm well known for having like a deep obsession with pinks and teals, and incorporating those into a lot of projects. And I do think I just, I like how those colors look. So, I am guilty of that. But but in the end, not really. There's a sort of I'll get into runs where like I just tend to use a certain color or set of colors for a little while as I'm like enamored of them at the moment, and so they're sort of a muse to me at that moment, right? And I'm just following where the passion takes me, as it were, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but not like in the long term. No, not really. I think that I like trying different things. I like doing different things. So I don't tend to ever really stick to like one palette or anything like that. If you if you look across my cases, armies tend to have like all my armies tend to have lots of different colors and color usage and stuff like that. And I other than saying I tend to use bright colors, because I don't generally like to paint things that are very sort of dour and dark and things like that. So other than that, no single color or color family that I migrate toward more often than others.
Okay. And on your hobby desk, what is the number one like paint range you're reaching for these days?
I mean, honestly, there's again, I don't want to be like a jerk, but there's not one. So I use Pro Acryl and AK third gen pretty regularly. Like those two are both to my left right now. I also will use the Liquitex acrylic gouaches,
Mm-hmm.
whatever these things.
Yep.
I use those quite a bit. I use Chimera and a paint line that I love deeply, but that you can't get anymore. I actually reached out to Neo, the guy who runs War Colors, and had him send me like one of the last batches of the entire set of Nostalgia '88 paints that they make. I
Oh
just
yeah.
think they were great paints. He now makes the Nostalgia '94 line, which is also really good. But the Nostalgia '88, like they're just very creamy paints. I like them a lot, so I use them a lot. It's basically what it boils down to.
All right.
I always feel bad using those in a video because you can't buy them now, and it's like
Yeah. It's like let me show
it's
this off.
always rough.
Let me show this off, but
Yeah,
you can't have it.
right.
Um. So turning now to more like a game side of thing because Highground we run tournaments here in Michigan. Um. Warhammer Weekly quite often gets brought up at our tournaments. People talk about it. I saw like what I saw on Warhammer Weekly helped me build this list, or they
Sure.
just talked about like I really hope some of those predictions are in the next book, that kind of thing. When when did you get the idea and like how did you implement Warhammer Weekly?
Sure. So Warhammer Weekly wasn't actually started by me. There was this guy named Nick who ran a channel called Long Island Wargaming many years ago, and this is back in the before times. And he would occasionally do this show called like Warhammer Weekly, and he would just have some people on and they'd talk about Warhammer, and he didn't do it regularly, and he kind of left it to the side for a little while. And he just wasn't like he clearly wasn't going to make the jump into AOS and all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, I'd like to take over the name. Do you have any problem with me doing this series? I'll run the show weekly and all that. And he was like, no, it's fine. It's all good. Go for it. He had no interest in basically making content anymore. He had a young family and new kids and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And so he'd only done maybe like 5 or 6 of those shows or something like that at that point. So I said, so then I was like, okay, I spent some time plotting out and planning out how I wanted the show to be. And really the format hasn't changed. I thought about, other shows and podcasts that I like and the way that they structure their show and built, sort of a timetable around that, of the various topics. When we first started, we actually had to keep the show to an hour because the idea was, Matiram was going to do his show right after ours. So we would be on at like 8 o'clock. And then the idea was to go right over to him for his show at 9 o'clock. And we'd send people over there live and, form a whole sort of evening of viewing. Obviously, he fell off as well. But like, and so then our shows had no reason to stop. And so we started going longer and longer and longer, right? And eventually shows truly got out of hand to now it's like our average time is probably 3 hours for an episode. I'm always thrilled when we can somehow magically keep it to like 90 minutes or 2 hours, but that's basically what occurs.
Great. Yeah, I know. It's funny that we're having the talk about like tournament prep and getting your army ready tonight, because yesterday on Warhammer Weekly was painting your army. So
Yep.
it was a really interesting topic, and I learned a ton. So I'm super excited and glad to see everybody painting now, and really getting into it. Although I'm never
Tyler was our holdout, but we got him.
Yeah, I'm never happy to see more Nurgle on the table, though. I got to be honest.
Oh, it's fine. He could have chosen much worse. So,
he could have. That's true.
That's what I think about.
That is true. The army wide wards always get me because ogres. We do those charge mortals, and we're just we get stomped sometimes when that happens. So
it's rough. It's rough.
So some of our community members, some of the guys here in our area, had passed along some questions for you.
Sure.
If you were to pick a rule from another gaming system to implement in Age of Sigmar, what one would you start with?
Wow, that's tough. From another gaming system. Well, there's a lot of good games out there. And, it's hard to say what you would pick because it can't just be something I like. Like, that's the trick. It doesn't matter if I like the rule. It has to be something that would actually work well in the ecosystem of AOS, right? So, and that's really the tougher fit. It could be that, something like, I don't particularly like A Song of Ice and Fire very much. I find it to be a pretty boring rank and flank game.
Mm-hmm.
But an interesting piece of their design that I do quite like is the sort of non-combat characters.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that those act off table, where they can sort of give certain bonuses by you set up their influence and you kind of like place them in this back and forth sort of order, and it has certain impacts on the game through their expressing their sort of influence over the game itself. I think that's a very interesting system. You could certainly imagine that sort of a NCO, right, or something like that, working in AOS, where it represents like your army is subservient to some higher up leaders, far away, and so like they that could have a presence on the board or something like that. It could be like, instead of being people, it could be like the influence of the gods, like, because it's epic fantasy. The one thing that's really missing is like the gods themselves taking a hand. Like, if you read ancient Greek myth, the gods themselves are constantly screwing around with people in the middle of battles and fights and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So representing that by having some kind of like fate movements that the Chaos Gods or Sigmar or similar characters who aren't necessarily present on the table could like interact and cause some minor swing in one way or another, I think could be interesting.
Yeah, that would be cool. I'd love to see what they do with Gork and Mork. Just
Oh, sure. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, that's exactly it, right? Like that kind of thing has a lot of potential. Um, the Game of Thrones is a very like or Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones and all that is a very like boring fantasy for babies kind of thing
mhm,
because it's this very like rote, gritty historical fantasy.
yeah,
But we would need a version amped up to 11 for AOS, but there's sort of no reason that couldn't happen.
yeah.
Like I said, if it was moved from just some people standing off board to the gods themselves taking a hand in the fight, yeah, I could see that.
That would be cool. And then so if GW, the incarnate caused a lot of issues, right? We had
Sure,
we had
as we predicted, yes.
yeah. So if they continue down the route of the incarnate, what would you like to see them do with the next one?
Make it a narrative only thing and build a narrative book and stuff like that around it. It just doesn't need to be in match play.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't. Like there's no reason that we have to put out a thing for every army because either you need to make it so weak that it's never taken in serious match play games,
Mhm.
right? Which is fine. But a real feel bad for the person who doesn't understand why it's bad, or you make it a narrative thing and you let the people who are interested in kneecapping themselves for the purposes of having fun with their story, which is what narrative players like to do.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not. That's not a judgment. That's just a statement of fact, right? Like, I want to play this game where you outnumber me. I want to play this game where you have this advantage and I don't, or whatever, right? Because it's a
Mhm.
cool story,
Yeah.
right? Um, cool. Okay, so let's do that, right? Like, make it so that's the thing, and that feels a lot better to me, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. I have played against the Zinch list with an incarnate in it, and that was
Sure.
scary and not fun. So I will say I would like to see something like definitely not as high powered as the incarnate of Gur for sure. If they're going to keep going that way, but who knows? They may have learned their lesson. We can only hope.
We can only hope.
So when when you prep for a tournament
Yep.
and you see that they're going to have a painting competition,
Yes.
how do you like to see that implemented in a tournament setting?
Uh, so I've written a like TO pack, the paint judging part of a TO pack before, but it's pretty straightforward. Um, like in general, I think the correct way to run a painting competition at a tournament is you should have some method of making a first cut that can be something like a very generous and open-ended scoring rubric. Your scoring rubric should never include things like the army has conversions. Incorrect. Not every army needs to have conversions. Not every army makes sense to have conversions. Or the army has freehand. I don't care if you have freehand. Why would that be a thing? Your painting rubric should be set up like the army displays, basic techniques in practice. List basic techniques. The army displays advanced techniques in practice. List advanced techniques. The army displays very advanced techniques in practice. List the very advanced techniques. If you have any of these, then you get the points, right? And so it widely stratifies people into sort of three categories. And then, what happens is uh, the uh, you cut to some top percentage of people, and then those are judged by judges who actually know how to judge a painting competition, who understand what a well painted model is, and that sort of thing. Like people who understand like what's good, who won't be tricked by sort of like painting nonsense, a flashy color scheme, or funny conversions or stuff like that that
Mm-hmm.
can lead to bad decision making in selection, and then go from there. That's sort of my preferred world. Um, Now it doesn't always necessarily work like that. Not every painting competition is going to have people on hand who necessarily know how to paint judge at that level, right? And so you if you don't have that, that's okay. It's not like you suddenly can't do paint judging. You either just, sort of do your best, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
or alternatively, uh, you you can uh, mix in the will of the people. Now, democracy isn't great; it often makes wrong decisions. But I do like it when there's a people's favorite sort of army.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's a good way to go. I think for small tournaments where you can't get a paint judge, that's generally a perfectly acceptable replacement sort of thing. But frankly, I like it when both are in play. I like to go to a tournament where there's both a people's choice and a judge's choice sort of award.
Okay.
I think that's a good way overall to really run things.
So here in Michigan, we have like the Michigan GT every year. And
Mm-hmm.
last year they implemented like a single figure painting competition on top of the army competition.
Okay.
So they have that separated. So when you're judging like a single figure, not like my best comparison would be like a crystal brush or a golden demon type painting competition where it's category based on game, like
Sure.
AOS, 40K, that kind of thing. Um,
Sure.
what's the first thing you look for when you evaluate one of those models?
Well, single figure or any kind of painting competition as opposed to army painting, they're very different things.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm paint judging an army, what I'm looking for is consistency across the force in quality. And that is structured loosely. What I mean by that is like I want to see a certain bare minimum level of quality, and then I want to see you go to the next level on your centerpieces and characters and stuff like that. Show me you invested the time in the things that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking for basically the same techniques, right? It's whenever you're displaying the use of advanced techniques and skill at implementing them in a good way. Uh, the three best AOS armies in the country right now. I'll excuse myself from that because I'm not going to judge my own stuff. But the three best AOS armies in the country right now are owned by Oscar Lars, Martin Orlando, and um, uh, shoot, and Kit. Uh, uh, what's his? I'm trying to think of his. Bleep Bloop is his name.
Oh, okay.
But Kit's his actual name, but Bleep Bloop's what he goes by on the internet. There you go. His undead army. Oscar has a couple different armies in the mix, actually. His KO being his most recent one that's absolutely fantastic. I got to judge it at Adepticon. And then Martin, his most recent was his Lumina. And if you look at those armies, they're treated more or less like slightly lesser quality competition figures across the board. Okay, but the difference is like what you're looking for. You want to see people go farther. I don't necessarily care if things are smooth, that's great. If that's not, that's okay. That's also fine. Just what else did you do? Like everything is balanced out. When I'm judging an army or a figure or anything, I'm looking for some mix of like the overall paint quality and how you did it, the technical, which is how you applied it and cleaned everything up and stuff like that. And then for armies, you have this other category called like the display, right? So like, what are you communicating to me with your total story, with your narrative, with your display board, with the way the conversions or the modifications or the whatever, however you set the scene, right? And it's not like any one of those things is necessary. It's just like how you've used the combination of tools and elements at your disposal to display to me, the awesomeness of this army. And all of those things are then weighted and scored and then put together, and that gives me a winner effectively, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're judging for single figure, I'm looking at a lot of the same stuff, like your paint, your technical, is what you're painting credible, that kind of thing. But I'm paying a lot more attention to the detail. You should be taking everything farther. Things that should have texture should have texture. Things that should be nice clean edges on the highlight should have nice clean edges highlighted. And so on and so forth. Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
everything should be elevated when you're getting down to single figures.
Okay, that makes total sense. When you So when you're getting ready for those tournaments, you've got your armies painted. Um, I know you have quite a few options in that realm.
Yeah,
Um, what what are you looking to get out of a tournament experience when you go?
sure. Well, I mean, like I'm certainly often trying to win best painted. Like that's not a I make no bones about that. Like
Yeah.
I'm certainly trying to accomplish that thing. Um Now, that being said, what I'm looking to get out of a tournament as far as my army goes is, 5 fun games of Warhammer. If I can place high, that's great. I'm certainly going to try. And I've been lucky enough to often find myself in like, the top tables in the later rounds. I think I'm a decent Warhammer player after all these years. And certainly like I practice and put time in and understand my army, but I also have my limitations. Like there are much better players than me in the country who, if I run into, I'm like, well, this is going to be an uphill battle. Um, but if I can give them a good game and have a good time, that's good enough for me. If I
Mm-hmm.
um, like I had a great year going like 3-1-1 at NashCon a couple years back. So like 3 wins, a draw, and a loss, and that was against my draw was against Noah, the captain for Team USA, and my uh, loss was to Anthony Tranelli that came down to one final dice roll. He needed to roll 3 up and didn't, and lost the game, and that was basically that. And Tranelli's a Team USA player as well.
Yeah.
Like if I'm losing games like that are coming down to that kind of an ending, I don't feel bad about that at all. That's what an incredible game of Warhammer that was, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna remember that much more than just a generic win, right?
Yeah. We they often call this part of Michigan the gauntlet for AOS players. We have like Sean Clark, the
Sure.
new captain at Team USA, and a
Yes.
bunch of the Team USA guys come here to play, and we get quite the rounds in at tournaments. So when you go to choose your army,
Yep.
right? Are you looking at the meta? Are you looking at like what you're best with, or are you
Oh
looking
God.
at like what am I going to have the most fun with?
I am looking at what army I happen to be working on at that moment that I think is cool.
Oh, okay.
Like that's it. That's literally the beginning and end of it. I don't put a lot of thought into my list. Like I'll mess around with it a little. I'm not a list tech guy like Tom or something like that. Like my co-host on Warhammer
Mm-hmm.
Weekly or Tyler, they think a lot more deeply about that stuff than me. Nope. I'm like when I was working on Stormcast, it was like, well, what seems interesting to me, right? What do I think would be fun to play with and paint? And paint has a big part of it, uh, to be honest. And that's really how I decide. And then like I practice with it and get as good as I can with that particular selection of models that I have. Uh, I went 4-1 last year at NashCon. That sounds right. Um, and that was with Stormcast, and that's not like the height of Stormcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I had like 2 dragons in my list, and I mean a Karzai. I had Karzai in my list, for God's sakes, right?
Yeah.
So I mean that should tell you everything you need to know. But like it was what I wanted to play. But I had practiced with it a lot and knew sort of the limitations and what my army could do and what it couldn't. And in the end, like at a tournament, until you meet other sort of top players, the reality of the thing is that you what's 4-1. I had to think about it for a second. I had to go back in my head and count all my games. Um, and the reality of the thing is, you're going to be much better suited by knowing your army in and out and understanding its matchups and like how much damage can your unit do against any other unit in the game, against a unit with
Yeah.
this save or this defense is like knowing your outs, knowing your moves, knowing your complicated plays. All of that kind of stuff is going to be 10 times more valuable than having like a meta army.
Yeah.
Because a on meta army piloted by somebody who doesn't know what to do with it is basically worthless, and it's gonna get rolled the second it meets anybody with any skill with their army. They're gonna pick it apart like a vulture on a corpse in the desert.
Yeah. Makes total sense. I have borrowed armies and been like a flounder on the dock, and
Right.
I've seen it happen, and it is not necessarily the most pretty thing um, in the world. So I totally get that. That makes absolute sense. What um of all your armies, how many AOS armies do you have? Like you could field 2,000 painted points and be like happy.
A lot. I mean, like, define happy. You mean like I'd take it to a tournament? I'd not as
Yeah.
many because many of my army, like a good number of my armies are speed painted, but like complete armies, sure. I have cities. I have Sylvaneth. I have Stormcast. I have Slaves to Darkness. I have Zinch. I have Slanesh. I have Korn. Uh, I have Sons of Behemoth and Ironjaws and Ogres and Flesh Eater Courts and Skaven and did I say Slanesh yet? I hope I
You
did.
did.
I have all the chaos
Yes.
stuff. Okay, I have
Yeah.
Beast of Chaos. I have everything chaos except Nurgle. Let me just do it that way. I have
Okay.
everything chaos except Nurgle. Flesh Eater Courts is my only death army besides like a obviously retired Tomb King's force. That's like 13,000 points, but that doesn't really count.
Well, they can be
In
bone rippers.
order,
That's fine.
sure. Uh, in order, I mean, like I said, Cities Dock, Sylvaneth, nothing Dwarf, nothing Elf other than Dock, which they don't count because they're cool.
Why
And
you
then
gotta hate the
Destruction,
dwarves,
everything.
man?
Um, because they're not cool. I don't know. Dwarves are. I don't. I've never liked dwarves ever. Not in D&D. Not in anything.
That's
Just
fair.
never.
That's
Never.
fair.
So I'm anti dwarf. Um, the the fantasy species there to be super clear as to what I'm referencing. I don't want anybody taking my words out of context, or I mean nothing
Absolutely.
in the real world,
Totally
of course.
understand.
Um, the uh, and then everything destruction except gets. So yeah, there you go.
Have you considered a Gitz army?
Not
Ab-
really. It
no.
just never appealed to me.
Yeah.
You'd think the squigs and stuff would appeal to me, but or some trolls or something, but no, it just does. I don't know for whatever reason. I'm it's never worked for me. Can't
Fair.
explain why.
It's totally fair. I don't think I'd ever play Daughters of Cain. It's just witch elves were an absolute nightmare for me to build the one time I did, and
Sure.
I never wanted to paint them, so I passed those off. But yeah, so which one of those?
Oh, there's a Seraphon army. I didn't mention that too,
Oh,
and I
okay,
have
yeah,
like a. I don't have a full 2,000 points, but I have maybe like 1,200 points of Soulblight Gravelords. I've been like tinkering with over years.
yeah. I was a weird entry into AOS. Like I painted for like 8 months, and then I played my first game with my completely unpainted Skaven army, and was like, "This is great." And I need more armies, and now I have
Sure.
11. So it's just in various states of completion, right? So,
Of course.
um, and then I had a list for a Michigan GT like 1 or 2 years ago, and probably 1 year ago, and then ended up having to paint 140 models in like 3 weeks to get ready. So it was a lot. But which of your like armies you would take to a tournament
Hmm.
are you most proud of in the finished state?
The Ratcast, the most recent Stormcast I did.
Yeah.
I should state that's like the second Stormcast army I painted. I have like two Stormcast armies.
Mm,
One I did right when AOS launched, and one this one. And the Ratcaster, I mean, it's a it's a it was a work of a lot of labor of love, and so like it's the most sort of consistent across the thing. I had a singular vision. It was based off of a character I played in Soulbound, and it had a nice theme and story to it and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely that one. Easy answer.
okay. Yeah, I really liked the one video you did. It was a really interesting take on, even if they didn't have like Skaven parts to them, just like the armor and everything. It was like a really interesting take on the entirety of Stormcast. So I was really that was really cool to watch. Um, so when you decided to do the Skaven cast, what was like the driving force behind I'm going to do this many conversions? Because obviously the whole army is like half
It's
Skaven.
converted, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that obviously that takes a lot of energy, a lot of thought. Like, how am I going to implement this? How am I going to make it consistent? What really like keeps you motivated through a project of that magnitude?
Well, it was a hard project because every single fig was, probably like 12 to 20 hours of work,
Yeah.
at minimum. The bigger figures or the centerpieces taking a lot more time than that. And I mean, what motivated me was, like I said, I had a story I really loved in Skig himself, and having this whole thing going on. I wanted it to be, the best looking army in the country, right? That's what I was thinking about the whole time, and then that's I pushed myself to accept nothing less than the best. Effectively, is the answer, right? Like, um, because I that was the goal, right? To
Mhm.
make something that was enduring, and a real, like, signature sort of army for me, that I could look at and be proud of for years to come.
Yeah.
So, that was basically the motivation.
So the end goal was the overall motivation. That makes absolute sense. Do you find it helps like when you start a project like any army really, like the Tron Tau you're working on now, even though it's
Mhm.
quick, there's almost a narrative to it. Do you find that the narrative helps you like flesh out what it's going to look like as you're working on it?
For the armies that I'm putting time into, yes, I think about what their story is. My Whirlwind's Edge army, which is all loving high tech steampunky conversions of city stuff. Some of it built completely from scratch, right? But like lots of 40K kits, Kit bashed in, and just other random weird stuff. You know that that what do I want to say? Uh that project was absolutely based on like a story, that um I had and wanted to put together and wanted to tell, and so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for those kinds of projects, yeah, if you're going to do something serious, having a good narrative, a good story, a good vision, all of that in your head is pretty essential. If it's something that I'm speed painting, like, no, it's just like, okay, whatever, it
Yeah.
seems like a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So
Makes total sense.
cool.
What would you say is like one army you don't have, whether it be like 40K or AOS or anything that you want to do in the future, and like how you would approach, setting up your 2000 points for that?
Well, the sad answer to this is there isn't any right now. Like, I don't have any armies that I don't. There are no armies that exist right now that I don't own and want to do with. The Tau is a fun experiment, but most 40K armies, other than knights, I find quite uninteresting.
Yeah.
I just don't really like the aesthetic of any of them. Is the honest answer. Like, I could go down the list of every 40K army and be like, no, 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 for various reasons. Tower cool, and so I'm playing with it as a speed paint. But really, my labor of love army in 40K is my Imperial Knights, which are all 150-hour projects for each night or whatever,
Mhm.
right? And AOS, I have basically every army I'd ever want. Now, if they redesigned the entire Skaven line, like, that's really what it would be. Like, what I actually want to see is some, uh like a redesign of Skaven that would bring me back in. So these future imaginary armies are what I could go for. Um, there's there are things they could release that I would go, yeah, I'm in for that, right?
Okay.
Um, so that's what I'll say. I mean, it's just I've gotten to the point where there's no, uh, Alexander wept for there were no more, mountains to climb, or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever the statement is.
Absolutely. So, with the Dawnbringer Crusades on the horizon, do you foresee adding or converting any of the now previewed city stuff to your current army, or you feel like you've already kind of closed those gaps?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have two cities armies as well. Is another thing that I've done twice already, right? Um, so it's like, would I do a third one? I doubt it highly. Nothing that I've seen so far with cities has really grabbed me. I think it's a good design. I think people will enjoy it and get use out of it and play it and love it, and that's all awesome to me. It's just probably not my particular style.
Yeah.
So again, there's no negative judgment on that. But I'm like, so is there going to be anything I'll add in? I mean, maybe it would encourage me to convert something new based on whatever the units are, if they're a cool thing or whatever. But like,
Yeah.
there's no burning need.
Okay. Uh, I need a hot take on the thin ogre.
I love Thin Ogre. It's fine.
Okay.
Nothing
Yes.
wrong with Thin Ogre. That's a
Absolutely.
very classic design for Empire ogres. Like I started playing
Yeah.
the my first army in Warhammer was actually an Empire army, but that wasn't a real army. Like it was cobbled together from donations and like Battle Masters Knights and stuff like that people gave me in the mid '90s.
Hmm.
So, and I played Empire for a while, all with just like, I mean, really slapdash stuff. I and but like I still have a bunch of those Battle Masters Knights, and I still have my war wagons and things like that. So those kinds of things were fun. But there was ogres as a regiment in that book back then.
Yeah.
Like you had imperial ogres. It's not like a new concept, right? It's just returning as with all things, it's just returning back to a good idea. Um, and they often pictured those in the art and so on as being more svelte. The image of the ogres with like the big bellies and the gut plates and all of that. That really only came about when they released sort of Ogre Kingdoms in 2004 or 5 or 6 or whatever year it was. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly. Somewhere in that range.
Okay. And ogres. Okay, we're in the new book. Are you foot ogres or are you beast claw?
Foot ogres all the way.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, Larry makes so many like cameos. I
Yeah,
assume.
like I love
Yeah.
gutbusters. I don't really. My ogre army is almost completely gutbusters. It's tons of foot ogres, man eaters and iron guts and gluttons galore.
Okay. I mean, hey, my second army was like just beast claw raiders, so I was late to the gutbuster party, and but
Gotcha. That's fine.
love.
There's nothing wrong with monster trucks.
Hey,
Halo has done a great job keeping it the big out there in the world. Nothing but respect. I always thought the monsters look kind of silly. Is my honest answer.
yeah, I mean, they're the shaggy ripped skin is a little much sometimes, but I just like I just need a box full of the stone horn, like actual horns.
Yeah, sure,
I would put those on everything. Honestly,
sure.
like that's the best part of that entire kit. So, in my opinion, um, are there any games like other than the Song of Ice and Fire? We've already talked about your dislike of that game. Are there any other games out there like GW or not that use minis that you wouldn't pick up and play like on an okay basis?
I mean, I've played lots of games. Basically only play AOS right now as a miniature game. Right, that
Hmm.
had 40K, I guess, because of 10th edition launch. But like, and that's not a judgment of them. They just don't, rev my engine. I've played Infinity
Yeah.
and I played Malifaux a whole bunch, especially in second ed. And, I've played Battletech for years. Like, I love Battletech deep within my soul. I find the game kind of annoying to play, but I love building mechs and I love the lore of the world. I think it's one of the most incredible like lore universes that's ever been put down, and it has novels that are all great and stuff like that. So, but like in the end, I'm not thirsting to play any of them. I'll play skirmish games. Obviously, I write skirmish games. We just released Majestic 13. So I like little pickup and play skirmish games like what we do. Uh, but like and so I would certainly happily play any of those. But like army size games, there's not really anything else out there that revs my engine, as it were.
Okay. How do you feel about things like I guess along the line of A Song of Ice and Fire, or like Middle Earth strategy battle games, like taking that IP and making it fit like a miniatures game. How do
Sure.
you feel when companies do that? Do you think there's a lot of error that can come out of a process like that, or do you think that they do an okay job normally?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you? If you can get a good IP on your game, isn't that seems like a huge advantage to me? Like, ultimately, it's a business. You're trying to sell copies of a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there has to be a certain amount of verisimilitude. You need to feel like you're in the world playing the thing. But I have no problem with it conceptually. I've seen good interpretations of IPs and bad interpretations of IPs, and good original ideas and bad original ideas. In the end, I don't think it matters too much. It's about. Uh, I don't think that like whether or not you're using an IP actually is determinative in any way of whether or not your game's good. Whether your game's good is determinative of whether your game's good. Like that's pretty much that simple.
Yeah. And how often, like how many times a week or a month would you say you're getting games AOS in?
I usually play once a week, so we have a regular Warhammer night. So yeah, I usually get a game in a week. You know, if there's a tournament I'm going to, then that'll be a 5 game weekend. But for the most part, yeah, about a game a week.
Awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of places they have trouble getting like a regular crowd out for a weekly game. So it's good to see those communities growing in different areas and making sure we're getting people in and hooked on the gray addiction over here because
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. Uh, so if you were to say, like, how do you schedule your week? Because you release like one hobby cheating a week, and you do Warhammer
Yeah.
Weekly, and you're also
Yeah.
painting all the time. How do you schedule your time to make sure that you're getting what you want out of your hobby, and also like feeling like you've accomplished something by the end of a week?
Carefully.
Yeah.
I live a very regimented, scheduled life. That is the answer. I mean, like I live and die by my very exacting, repetitive schedule. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the short answer to your question. Like, every day I subtract all choice possible. I eat and drink the same things the same times every day that I can. I have certain days that are dedicated to my wife and our time together. I have days that are dedicated completely to the hobby or to my weekly D&D game or so on. And like each of those things lives in their place, and that's where they live, and I don't deviate. I have a military like precision with my scheduling to make sure that it remains tolerable.
Absolutely.
Also, I don't have kids,
Well,
so
that
that helps.
probably helps. Yeah. Um, how many hours a week would you say that you spend like actually painting?
Well, it's hard to say. Like, I wish it was still 40, um, but it's probably not anymore. I don't know what it is. It's because I spend more time like editing videos now and stuff like that, and preparing for the show. Like as I've tried to up the quality on Warhammer Weekly and up the quality on my hobby cheating videos and so on, and then also am involved in like doing the Patreon and things like that. Like all those things are good, but all those things take time, right? And so like something else has got to give. So I don't have as much time as I used to just sit around and paint. So it's probably more like 30 hours now a week. But then like if making my videos is hobbying and stuff like that, because that's certainly a huge chunk of my time as well. Filming stuff, editing stuff, things like that. So
Yeah.
uh, just doing general like answering other people's questions and responding to other people's requests for reviews and all those sorts of things. So it's uh, it's a never-ending journey, is what I'll say.
Excellent.
Well, but the short answer is as many hours as I can.
Okay. And inquiring minds want to know, what character do you play in D&D?
I mean, a lot. I play a lot of different characters. I mean, we've had a regular game for more than 20 years with effectively the same group. There's two of us who are still in the original group. Many people have passed on, but we've had a very stable group for a long time. And I'm religious about the Tuesday game. We don't miss games. People are expected to be there. Like it is you don't miss games unless you're dying or you have some extremely serious excuse, like you broke your leg or your partner is being rushed to the hospital, then I can accept it. Beyond that, you better be a game. And Like I've played D&D on my wife's birthday. I played D&D on 9/11, and I've played D&D on everything in between. Um, the uh, the and over the years, I mean, I keep an Excel list of every character I've ever played. There's a lot of them, like since I started D&D all the way back.
Yeah.
And yeah, I keep most of those character sheets and stuff like that. At the moment, if you want to know, in our current game, we're playing through the Rime of the Frost Maiden. And I am playing we are all weird Spelljammer characters who crashed our spaceship into the area just outside of 10 towns and are now wrapped up in this weird mystery. And I am playing a space goblin from the Feywild who is a barbarian but doesn't know he's a barbarian. Like, he's not a barbarian intentionally. He was near the helm of the Spelljammer when it exploded, and he's the Hulk because, like, he's actually a doctor, but he's a very stupid doctor. Like, he's dumb. But then the stats I rolled were such that, like, physically he's incredible, and mentally he is not. But he's a good doctor. It's the one skill he has. He's a good doctor by goblin standards, I would say.
Okay.
And when he gets angry or when his best friend gets threatened, he hulks out. So I'm like a giant. I'm a giant path barbarian. So that you actually. The funny thing about the giant path barbarian is you actually turn large when you rage.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what size you started as. So I'm a little small goblin, and then I get angry and I become a large giant, which is just very fun. It's fun to suddenly become a storm giant or a fire giant or whatever.
Absolutely.
And this last week, we fought a giant Shardlin dragon that was attacking the town, and I raged and then drank a potion of growth, so I was actually huge, and so that way I could go toe to toe with the dragon even when he got up in the air and just started, getting up there and beating the crap out of the thing. Nothing better than being a 25-foot tall goblin.
Okay. What was your first D&D character?
My first D&D character ever was a wizard.
Okay.
Was a wizard named Sauron, as a matter of fact.
Oh, nice.
Because, like, I was like, oh, I'll make a good guy named Sauron. See, I'm clever because I'm 10 years old and I had just read The Lord of the Rings.
Makes total sense.
Absolutely. But that was my first ever D&D character. I played wizards through most of second edition. I've played a lot of bards in fifth edition. So, but over time it varies. Different things in different editions. I've played all the editions, and even went backwards before I started.
Excellent. Good to hear. So, if you were to pick your favorite model in all of Age of Sigmar, what would it be?
Keeper Secrets.
Okay.
It's a beautiful, perfectly sculpted model. It completely embodies what it's meant to be. It's a perfect mix of beauty and horror. It's expertly designed. It's simple and yet lots of room for exploration and expression. It is a near perfect miniature.
Excellent. Is there a perfect miniature?
No, but we can always. It's an asymptote, but we can approach it.
Cool. And now I did get one more community question. Someone was thinking of a project for the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Sure.
And they want to use AOS minis. Okay. What 4 mounted characters would you use if you did?
The Lord on Carcadrak painted red for war. The new resculpt of the what's his name? The Nurgle guy for plague. The Dread Harrow or something like that, or maybe the named Nighthaunt guy without his wings. I can't remember his actual name.
Reikenor.
But the Reikenor, yes, yep. Reikenor the Grim Hailer. Reikenor without the wings, much like Richard Gray did him for Famine. And then I don't know for Pestilence. Pestilence, Famine, War. Oh, sorry, no. That's Plague. Sorry, that's Pestilence. There you go. Yeah, the Nurgle guy. And then Death. Of course. How could I forget Death? Behold, a pale horse, and the man who rode on him was Death, and hell followed with him. Yes. So for Death, boy, that's tough. I'm trying to think of who would be a great Death model. Because like maybe the resculpted the brand new White King on Mount, that resculpt is really nice and really good. He could be a good Death.
Cool. So I think we've hit it all. We got some background, we got some great insights, and uh, here at Highground, we just want to say thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge and taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us and do this. And um, this video is going to release on a Wednesday, so everybody make sure you check out Warhammer Weekly tonight, where Vince and his merry band of thieves do their thing. And make sure you search. You go on Patreon if you're so inclined. I'm in the Patreon for Vince, and it is just nonstop excellent advice on how to really up your mini game. So, Vince, where else can we find you? Social, anywhere?
Sure, on Twitter under Warhammer Weekly at Warhammer Weekly. I'm on Insta under my name, just Vincent Venturella. You can find me there. But yeah, and then Facebook, same thing. But yeah, you covered it. All those places.
Excellent. And make sure
Basically, I'm Vincent Venturella everywhere. Even on Twitter, if you search Vincent Venturella, you'll find me. So anywhere Vincent Venturellas are sold.
Excellent. So make sure that you like, share, subscribe this video, and then head over to Vince's page and make sure you like, share, subscribe all the great content over there. Subscribe to Warhammer Weekly, and we will see you for the next hobby hangout. And hopefully, in the far flung future, when we have some new Skaven models, we can get Vince back on to talk about his journey painting those and how great all of that has been. So we'll see you guys next time.